Hello, Phil Conrad here, and this is a video for CS156. We're working on the backend database CRUD operations for a Spring Boot backend, and we have arrived at the stage in our project where we're going to create the database. And so let's do that now. We're going to go to our Kanban board, and that will be here at team01 staff. And if we look at our Kanban board, we'll see that if I type in commit, which is the name of my database, because this is a database for GitHub commits, one row per commit. I've already done the create personal Dokku deployment that we did that in the last video. And now we're going to create the database table for commit. So I'm going to open this up. There will be some information in this issue that is not in your issues. Your issues will look more like the following. Let me find a sample one here. So actually, let me find the one for create database table if I can. Let's see. It appears that those have already been, well, here's one, create database table for recommendation request. So this is what your issues will look like. And for the fields and recommendation request, you will need to go to the instructions and you'll see here the two database tables on the starting code, UCSB dates and UCSB dining commons. Those are the models that we're going to follow. And then down here, these are the 6 database tables that you will be adding. Each of you has claimed one of these 6. So if, for example, you're doing recommendation request, you would click here, and these are the fields that would be in your database table, and it would explain, it would have some sample values here. I'm working on one that is none of these 6. So I put the instructions right into the issue on the Kanban board. So we're going to be creating a database table that has 4 columns, one for message, URL, author login, and commit time. We're going to be using a zoned date time because the date timestamp on each commit actually has a time zone associated with it. But these are the fields we're going to be adding in the database. So what do we need to do? You should read this, and I'm not going to take time in the video to read it to you, but I will explain just the basic idea. There are 2 samples of the CRUD operations, create, read, update, destroy, that are already done for you in the code base that are the models for you to follow. The difference between them that I want to point out is that one of them has an ID value for each row that is a consecutive integer. A long is how it's represented in the data type in Java. And these consecutive integers start at 1 and they just get incremented every time. By contrast, the UCSB dining commons has an ID field, which is the name, actually it's the code for the dining commons. This is the unique ID for each row rather than consecutive integers. And those look different in the code. So as you consider each of these database tables, you need to figure out which one corresponds, which model should you be following. For UCSB dining commons menu, there is going to be an ID field that's going to be consecutive integers. For UCSB organization, no. The org code is what's going to be the database the database identifier for each row in the table, the unique identifier. So for this one, you would follow the UCSB dining commons model. And for this one, which has consecutive IDs, integer IDs, you would follow the UCSB dates model. We're going to be following the UCSB dates model for ours. But you should take a moment, and if you're following along while you're doing the lab, you may want to pause the video, read this, look at your database table, and decide which model you're following. We then have this link. Your task is to add CRUD for additional database tables. So we're going to be adding, in this issue, we're adding the entity and repository classes. And we're also adding, it's not mentioned here, but we're also adding the database migration file. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 more issues after this one. So in this issue, we're just doing this first bullet item here. But it would be good for you to read over this entire section of the web page for the assignment. So you may want to pause the video and read through that now, so that you get an idea of the big picture. I'm just going to jump right in on the work for adding the database table. So let's go back to the Kanban board. And here is the link that has the detailed instructions for what we are doing in this step. So to add an SQL database table in Spring Boot, you typically add 2 files and then in addition, a database migration file. The first thing we're going to do is create an entity file. So I'm going to go over to my repo. Let me make this window a bit bigger. I'm going to cd into the directory where our GitHub repo is. So team01 staff. And yours will be team01 and then your team name. I'm going to do a git status. We are on the branch PC create DB table commits. I'm going to do a git pull origin and then my branch name. This is always a good idea just in case you have pushed some commits and you're working on a different computer. In this case, I know that I just created a fresh branch off of main. So there's no real need to do that, but it's still a good practice. Another good practice occasionally is to do a git pull ---- rebase origin main. This will pull any changes to the main branch into your branch. In this case, it's already up to date, so we don't need to do anything further. If it told us that it updated our branch, we would need to do a git push origin and then our branch name -f after doing a rebase. But in this case, there's no particular reason to do that because we don't really have any commits on this yet. So we can't, creating a pull request at this point is maybe a little premature, so we won't do it yet. We will just continue with the steps here. So the first step is to add our entity class. So we're going to go under source main Java entities, and we're going to add a file. Our database table name is commit. It's going to be a singular noun. UCSB Dining Commons is actually a singular noun, even though it ends in an S. And we're going to use UCSB date as our model. So I'm going to basically come over here and do, let's see. Is there a duplicate in here? There isn't. But I think if I do copy and paste, I get a copy of that file, UCSB date copy, which I'm now going to rename to commit. That's the name of my table. Now in here, starting from the top, all of these imports are fine. But this comment, this is a JPA entity that represents a GitHub commit. And I think that's all I need to say. These annotations here, at data refers to Lombok, and that's going to generate for me the getters and the setters and the constructor. Actually, all args constructor, no args constructor are generated by these two. At data will also generate for me the dot equals method, the toString method, and the hashcode method. At builder gives me a special method that I can use to build new instances of the object. And then at entity is what tells Spring Boot that this is a database table. And here, this name equals, this is going to be the name of the table. So I'm going to call this commits. And I hope I spelled that right. This should be a plural noun because it's the name of the table. Public class UCSB date. This should be a singular noun. This code right here, I'm going to leave alone. This is the code that generates the consecutive integers for each row in my database. And now I'm ready to change these to my fields. So I have private string. If I go back to the card on the Kanban board, it told me I can pretty much just copy this in as it is, and except I'm going to need to put private in front of each of these. So private string message, private string URL, private string author login. On Mac, if I do Shift Option F, it will reformat my code. You can see that local date time is no longer being used. I'll take it out. Because I have all the right, what do you call them, extensions installed, it automatically stuck in an import for zone date time for me. So that was nice. And now I think I'm pretty much done with the entity file. So it's that simple. So what am I going to do next? Let's come back over to here. And if I look at my acceptance criteria, there is an entity file called commit.java. Check that one off. Next, there is a repository class called commit repository. Ooh, yeah, that's right, commit repository.java. Okay, so come back over here and go down to the repositories menu. And we are working with UCSB date as our model. Rather, as the model for how we make this repository class. The entity class represents one row in the database. The repository class represents the entire database table, just to understand what we're doing here. So I made a copy, and I'm going to rename this to commit repository.java. So in my comment, the UCSB date repository, this should be the commit repository, is a repository for commit entities. This will be commit repository. Extends CRUD repository, not of UCSB date and long, but of commit and long. Now, this commit has the wavy red line because I need to import the entity. So instead of importing entity UCSB date, we'll change this to import entities UCSB, or not just UCSB, just commit. Commit is the name of our entity. This CRUD repository is parameterized with commit and long. CRUD repository is a class, or actually in this case, probably an interface that represents a database table of these rows and using this as the index, the primary key. You will recall that the UCSB organization used a string as its primary key. If we look at the entity for UCSB organization, its ID field is the org code, a private string. So in that case, we need string here. So let's come back, though, to the one we're working on, which is the commit repository. We have commit and long. Now, there is a method in here that returns also UCSB date entities with a given quarter. We actually do not need that method for what we are doing. It is perfectly fine for the commit repository to be completely empty. Now, you may wonder, well, wait a minute. If you know about interfaces in Java, interfaces have no implementation. So how can this even possibly work if we aren't specifying any implementation? Well, the answer is Spring Boot will take this interface and it will automatically generate a class that implements this interface. It's part of the Spring Boot magic. And that saves us a lot of time. So the Spring Boot framework knows how to take this interface and implement a class that has all the methods we need. In a CRUD repository, there are methods to save database records, to find them, and so forth. If we need custom methods, we can specify them here. And again, we only need to specify the signature of the method. Spring Boot will create them for us automatically. But we don't need that for this project. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I just want to mention it so that later in the course, when that becomes important, you'll perhaps remember. Um, for now, our work here is pretty much done. So what we might do just to make sure that we haven't made any syntax errors is come over here and we'll do maven clean. I'm sorry, not maven clean, maven clean compile. This will just make sure that we haven't made any syntax errors. We'll also try maven spring boot run just to make sure that we're still good. Um, and so far, so good. It seems like it's coming up. As you may recall, when we're running on localhost, we need to cd into our front end directory, nvmus 2017.0. By the time you see this video, we may be on a different version of NVM. So use the version that you've been advised to use by your instructor, and not necessarily this version. In fact, we set this version at the beginning of fall 2024. It's already moved on to 2018, but we're sticking with this version for now. So NVMUs and then npm CI, if we haven't run the front end before. You only have to do that once for your code base, typically, unless the dependencies change. But I don't think I've done it in this directory yet. So we'll go ahead and do npm CI. Give that a minute to cook. All right, let's see. Oh, we got an error. What did we get here? This can happen if you use the no optional flag. So it's complaining about Darwin ARM64. That may have something to do with the fact that I am on a Mac that has the ARM64 architecture. This has an Apple Silicon. I'm going to pause the video and see if I can figure out how to fix this. So bear with me a moment. All right, so I looked up that error and I found this, ES Darwin ARM64. The suggestion is that if we remove node modules and then run npm I again, that might fix it. So let's try that. And let me just point out, there's this directory called node modules. Anytime you want to kind of reset your React project, or any kind of node project for that matter, you can remove this directory entirely and then do npm CI all over again. And what that does is it re-downloads all of the dependencies that your node project has. And the suggestion is that if we get rid of that contents of that directory and do this again, that it will solve the problem. And it did not. Let's try, now they suggested npm I. Let's try that instead. npm I is short for npm install. All right, that worked. My concern is that if I do a git diff here, oh, good, there is no difference. So it looks like that did what we need. So apparently in this case, I needed to do an npm install instead of an npm CI. And yet, oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, no. Actually, on second thought, I was worried that it had changed my package.json or my package lock.json, and it did not. So far, the only things that have changed are commit and commit repository, which is exactly what we would expect. So we'll go ahead and proceed. I'm going to do npm start, and hopefully my my application will start up here. And we'll go to localhost 8080. Hopefully I can log in. And I have a login error. Let's see what happened. So over here, I am seeing that we have an error, and the error is probably caused by the fact that let's see. No such method. Cannot load service. This may be caused by the fact that I created my entity and my repository, but I did not yet create the database migration file. So let's just assume that that is the problem and see if creating that database migration file fixes the issue. So what is a database migration file? Well, the idea is that there's sort of two ways you can go about, well, there's more than two, but let's contrast two ways of going about building a Spring Boot app that has a database. One way is that you simply define your entities and your repositories, and then in the resources file and the application properties, there is this JPA, Spring JPA Hibernate DDL Auto none. If you change this value, there's a value you can change this to where it will automatically create all the database tables every time you start up the application. And that's great. That gives you the flexibility to make any changes to those tables anytime you want, and all is well. The problem is if you actually have a production application that is already running and already has real data in it. If you keep this DDL auto, every time you restart the application, you lose all the data in your database. That's no good. What a database migration framework allows you to do is to say, if you have a live application and it has a database, as you make changes to the structure of that database by adding tables, adding fields, removing fields, renaming fields, it will generate the SQL commands, the database commands necessary to update the database along with the code. That is the idea. So we're trying to incorporate that into our practices in this course because it is the way that you need to work with databases in the real world. So what we are going to do is we're going to go into this DB migration file, and under changes, you'll see for each of our database tables, we have a file, and I'm going to use the UCSB dates file as my model, and I'm going to copy that and rename this to commits.json. And I'm going to start at the top, and this is going to be commits1. It's going to be the ID of this change set. The author, I'm going to use my GitHub ID, P. Conrad. Mark ran is you just leave that alone. That basically says that if it fails, we're going to keep track of the fact that it failed. We're only going to run this if this table does not exist, and the table that we want to run, that we want to check for is commits. So if this table does not exist, we will run this change set. If the table does exist, then we don't run this change set. And what are the changes? Well, we're going to create a table, and it's going to have these columns. For primary key name, the example has constraint 5, but that's a terrible name. We're going to call this adding of the primary key commits PK, which stands for commits primary key. This name needs to be unique across the entire database. So this will be because it is the name of the table, which is unique, and then PK that will be the extension that we only use for primary keys. It is an ID field. It is a big int field. Now these other columns, we need to change these to the fields that are in our database, which are, if we go back, message URL, author login, and commit time. So let's come back here and actually see if I can get that on the screen at the same time. So there is message, and message is going to be of type string, which actually in the types here are SQL types. So varchar 25 are going to be our string type. Now that is going to make an upper limit on the number of characters that can be in our commit message. And that limit might not be the best one to use. But for now, we will stay with that. If we needed this to be a longer string, there are other types that we could use to support that. But we will go ahead and stay with that for now. The URL will also make that be varchar 255. The author login will be. Now, here's where we want to be very careful. Author, and then you see the L here is in camel case. We need to use snake case, author underscore name, or sorry, author underscore login for that. Anytime you have camel case in your fields, you need to change that to all uppercase snake case in your database migration file. The reason for that is explained in the team01 instructions. I will leave that for you to read. And then table name is commits, and we have one more field. So we're going to add one more of these braces here and the comma there. So you can see each one of these fields is a JSON object. It's got an open set of open braces. And then in here, we've got column, which is also an object, which has fields name and type. And so we need here a comma, and then this one is going to be commit underscore time. And this one is going to be a date. Let's look at one of the other examples, UCSB dates. It looks like timestamp is the field we want here. Though I do want to check and make sure that whether a timestamp carries a time zone with it, because if it doesn't, we're going to need a different SQL type, one that does carry a time zone with it. For now, I'm going to put in type timestamp, but let me pause the video for a moment and look that up. All right, I looked it up, and apparently this is the syntax. We will find out if it works. We're kind of breaking new ground here, which is usually not what I would like to do in these examples, but hey, I picked commits as my database table, so this is sometimes this is just how it is. So we will see what happens. This is my database migration file. So what I'm going to do is come over here. I'm going to do a Maven clean just to point out this target directory. If you wonder where does the database actually live on localhost, it's under target, and there it is, db development mv, db development trace.db. These two files represent the database. If I do Maven clean, they go away. So if I now do Maven Spring Boot run, let's actually stop the front end as well. We don't really need to stop the front end, but it'll just be a little bit cleaner. We'll run the back end, see if we get any errors. Looks like that all worked. You can see here where it says liquibase changelog. This is database table UCSB dining commons created, table restaurants created. This is all driven by the database migration files. So if we scroll back far enough, we should hopefully see, yep, there it is, table commits created. Change set, commits.json, commits run, ran successfully. So that is what we're looking for. Now I do see some errors here. Do I want to know, check show command step could not be instantiated. Let's just pretend we didn't see that for now and hope all goes well. npm start. Let's go run. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to log in. And we have an error. Okay, so this error might be as a result of the fact that I rotated the secrets, and I might not have put the new client secret in my .env file. So let me pause the video for a second and check that. I'll be right back. Okay, indeed, the problem was that I had changed I changed the client secret in my Google OAuth. I did that because in the previous video, the secret value was revealed, but I had forgotten to change it. I changed it on my Dokku. I didn't change it in my local, my .env file locally. Just did that. Now we were able to log in. So now if I go to the H2 console, what I'm doing here, by the way, the password is simply password, and my browser won't like it because it'll say, oh, that's a terrible password. Let's try that again. Password, connect, save, and it is not liking this. Database users pconred test not found. All right. I think maybe this URL is not correct. Let's pause again. Let me just check and see why this is happening. Ah, yes. Okay, that makes sense. If we actually look at the instructions here, you can see that there is a link here in the instructions when you start up the repo. So we did the repository file, we did the database migration file, and then when you start up the repo on localhost, this is what we're trying now. You can see the table using the H2 console. But what I didn't do was go to these instructions. And you see that we need to put this value in here. And that value is currently not the right value. So let's fix that. If we go to our React app and we go to the H2 console, this needs to match, and let's rearrange this on our screen here. This needs to match what the instructions show. And there's the instructions. Let's put that on one side of the screen. And as I showed you, the database is in file : ./target/db-development. Now, if I connect, there it is. And you can see that these are all the database tables I have, and I do have a commits table, and it has fields, ID, message, URL, author login, and commit time, just as we want it. So, this acceptance criteria is satisfied, and now we want to deploy it to Dokku. So what we're going to do next is we're going to come over and open a new terminal window. We're going to SSH to Dokku. So SSH pconred at Dokku 0. Now I'll come back to this window, Control C, and then do a get status. I need to actually commit these files. Now that they work on localhost, it's reasonable for me to do a commit. So I'll do a commit. I'll first of all get add dot, and then always type get status after you get add dot to make sure that you're not picking up some extra stray files. These look fine, so I'll do a commit, and I'll say create database, if I can type, table for commits. And that's perfectly fine as a commit message. The details that it's an entity, a repository, and a migration file, that's just part of what you do when you make a new database table in Spring Boot. So we don't need to put that necessarily into the commit message. The commit message really should be the bigger picture thing you're doing to the application rather than the nitty-gritty details. The nitty-gritty details are in, like if you want to know that, you will look at the code and you can see the diff. We really need to know more why we're doing why we're changing the code rather than what changes we're making in the code, if that makes sense. We made those changes. Why? Because we wanted to create a new database table. So that's what the commit message says. All right, so now we've got that commit. We need to push it, get push origin and our branch name. And here's a little hint. If you add -u, that sets origin PC create DB table commits to be the default remote and branch. U stands for the upstream, and it sets that. And now I can just do get push, and it will automatically go to that remote and that branch. And that's what this branch set up to track, blah, 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 what all that means. All right, so now that I've pushed that, now I can go back over here to Dokku and do um, Dokku get sync. My app is team01 dev pconrad1, and the repo is https github.com ucsb cs156f24 team01. In my case, it's team01 staff. And the branch I want is not the main branch this time. I want this branch PC create DB table commits. So put that in. That is super fast. And now we'll do Dokku PS rebuild. Oh, and I need to specify the name of the command, the name of the app, which is team01 dev pconrad1. And this is all running a lot faster than it did before. You can see a lot of those commands to set up Ubuntu and so forth. All of that is cached, so it's able to do that a lot more quickly. The building of the application it has to do over again because the repo has changed. So that we have to wait on. But it's moving along pretty fast. Right now, npm CI, it's building the front end. That is an opportunity. We might be able to speed things up if we were to figure out how to cache the building of the front end. So that's something we could think about doing in a future project. I'm going to pause this for a moment while we wait for this to finish building. All right, so we got past the building phase, and now it's deploying, trying to do the Maven Spring Boot run. And it's releasing it, and then it will do the checks to make sure that it's up. It does these checks to make sure that the new app is up and running before it kills the old one, so that if the new one fails, the old version will still be running. So it's just checking to make sure that the new one is up. This is this zero downtime deployment feature of Dokku. And it looks like we're coming up, I hope. And application deployed. So now we can take this and try it on Dokku. H2 is the database that we use on localhost because it's a lot easier. It's built into the Spring Boot code, so we don't have to install or configure anything. But H2 is a very lightweight database that is not really suitable for running in production. Postgres is a professional quality database that works in production. So that's what we run on Dokku. So we're logging in, and we're logged in now. And now what we want to do is check the database. We can't do it through the H2 console because H2 is not the database we're using. Instead, we come back over to Dokku and we do Dokku Postgres connect and the name of our database, which is team01 dev pconrad1 db. And if I type \DT, it will show me the list of all my tables. And in fact, there is the commits table. So that is what we want to see. So I'm going to leave this up for a moment because we're pretty much ready to do a pull request. We have met all the acceptance criteria. So do a PR for this branch, being sure to enter a reasonable title and description. I want to encourage you oh, well, that didn't work. I need to fix those links, which I will do. But in the meantime, I'll show you where you can find what that was intended to link to. was over here. If I put in PR titles, this is part of a whole page about doing pull requests. And there is a part in here about making a reasonable title and a reasonable PR description. Rather than go over that, because you can read that on your own, I'm going to show you by example how to do this. So first of all, to make the pull request, I want to go to my repo on GitHub. So I'll go to github.com, UCSB. There's our organization, and this is team01 staff. And under pull requests, if you pushed to the branch recently, very often it will just have this up here. Create DB table had pushes 6 minutes ago. And so I can just click the compare and pull request button, and it will make the pull request. So PC create database table for commits. That's actually a pretty good title, so I'm going to leave that alone. Say in this PR, we add the database, we add a database table that represents a GitHub commit with the following fields. And then this 3 backticks here is a way to create a fence for a code section. I'm going to go back to my here and grab the fields that are going to be in this. And let's see, where am I creating my pull request? I think that is in, it's in one of these tabs. Let's start closing tabs until I find it here. Here it is. All right, so those are the fields. You can test this by running on localhost and looking for the commits table on the H2 console. And I believe that on one of these tabs, let's see, are we still running on localhost? We're not, but I can come back over here and fire up Maven Spring Boot run again. And then I can come back to localhost 8080, go to the H2 console, connect, and there's my commits. So I can make a screenshot of that. And when you have a screenshot that is copied in your paste buffer, you can try to find the, there it is. And you're editing one of these, well, pretty much anything on GitHub, you can just paste the image in. It will automatically upload it and make a link to it. So you say, you can also test this by running on Dokku and looking at and connecting to the Postgres database and running \DT. And so I'll come over here to my terminal window where I did that. And I'm just going to copy all of this and again, make the 3 backticks, paste that in there. And then if I click preview, you can see what this will look like. So you can see that shows exactly what we did and that the commits are there. So this pull request is ready to go. I'm going to do draft pull request. One other thing I should do is I should go back to my issue and see what number this issue is. It's issue number 51. And in my pull request, right at the top, I can say closes number 51. And what that will do is that will link this issue and this pull request together. Watch what happens when I click update comment. This is now a link to the issue, and the issue links to the pull request. So, and you can see down here also under development, there's a link to the issue. And if we merge the pull request, it will automatically close the issue, and it might even move it to the done column automatically on the Kanban board. Now, right now, this is a draft issue. I don't know. I think I did that by mistake when I created the issue. If I want it to be an actual issue, I can assign some reviewers. So I'll assign some reviewers from my team. Let's say Janelle and Daniel and Grace. And why is it still showing as a draft issue? Right here. If I click ready for review, now it will no longer be a draft issue. And it's going to now run all the checks on GitHub Actions. And we are looking hopefully for all green here. While we are waiting on that green, we can go back to our Kanban board. And now that this has a pull request, we're going to drag it over to in review. And at the bottom of this, it'll tell me what to do next. Make a PR, review other people's PRs, and then start the next issue. So the next issue will be create commit controller. So I'm going to assign that to myself, drag it to in progress, and create a new branch, starting from the branch for the issue you just finished. So let's do that. Let's go over here. We're looking for create commit controller. There's create commit controller. Going to drag that to in progress. Going to come in here. We can \Q, by the way, is how I get out of this database over on Dokku. Going to come back here, Control C, get status. That is my branch. I'm going to get checkout -b PC create commit controller. That will be the new branch for my next issue, which is now in progress, and we will continue with that issue in the next video. Thanks for watching.